Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we're on PTCGO doing another post-Roaring Skies deck analysis. Today it's going to be Primal Kyogre. I feel like after Roaring Skies it gains a few cards that makes it slightly better, and also a few matchups where Kyogre, I would imagine, is kind of favourable. So let's hop right into the deck. First off, we'll quickly scan over this Kyogre. Water Pulse is a fairly helpful attack against Seismitoad decks. If you can force the Seismitoad to be asleep with Water Pulse, you can sometimes buy yourself a turn of trainers, which is very helpful to help you stabilise in that matchup. And also Giant Whirlpool, although we're not going to use it too often, it does 140 for 2 water, 2 colourless, returning 2 water energy attached from himself into the hand. So it's sort of a decent way of retaining energy, and if we're unable to chain Primal Kyogres after you've used your first Primal to charge up this one, presumably on the bench, you can do that the following turn if you can't find your own Primal Kyogre. So it's good to bear that attack in mind. However, the main threat of the deck is going to be Primal Kyogre. Of course, with the Alpha Growth, allows us to attach an extra energy card for our turn. This is fantastic for powering up his attack Tidal Storm, doing 150, and you're forced to move 2 energy from this guy onto one of your bench Pokemon, and you also get to do 30 to each of your opponent's benched EXs. This is really good for setting up knockouts on 170 and 180 HP EX Pokemon, so if they're not playing Megas, or if they're unable to Mega for the turn on the bench, we can sometimes take easy prizes on these EXs that find themselves sat there. Also, Tidal Storm, thanks to that Alpha Growth, and now that we have Mega Turbo, we can actually try and get this off turn 2, which is kind of a scary thought to think about. Kyogre's been seen as being kind of slow, but with Mega Turbo sometimes we can get slightly quicker starts, which is pretty helpful. So that's a really powerful attack to bear in mind. Also, the biggest weakness I think at the moment for Primal Kyogre is that Grass weakness. Although Virgen's not all too popular right now, it's seeing some play combined with Mega Manectric. And also, we're seeing a lot of Leafeon Raichu using the new Skyfield right now. I don't think it's that good of a deck, but at least I'm seeing it a lot on PTCGO, and it's making meals out of Kyogre, really. Kyogre really doesn't handle Leafeon all too well, because we're forced to attach so many energy in this deck that it's not very consistent. My main strategy against that is actually using DCE on Shaman against the Leafeon, so that I don't just attach the whole game and then bring up something else so that they hit with Raichu and just stall them out. But regardless, hopefully we don't get into a battle against that deck, because it's really awkward. Anyway, let's talk about some more Pokemon in the deck. We've got the Suicune. This is a fantastic card. Safeguard, we know it's annoying. It's been around for ages. And Aurora Beam doing 70. We can chip away at Pokemon, basically. Take the slow route to victory. Against stuff like Rayquaza, where they're not playing the Raichu, you can pretty much just auto-win. Sometimes even against like Trevenant Shaman, you'll have the luxury of just sitting here for a while, and they're not going to be doing any damage other than laser damage. And we have our own Rough Seas to sort of bounce that stadium and then heal ourselves up. So we'll have some time to maybe stack up on Aurora Beam. Of course they're going to hammer us away the whole time, but eventually we can sort of start getting attacks off with this guy. And in more general matchups, just sticking him active. We have Keldeo Floatstone combo, so that we can put Suicune into the active quite easily whenever we find him, really. Just to sit him out there so that Kyogre doesn't get damaged in the early turns. It's a very useful card to have in here. So we've got 2 in the deck. Next up we've got Keldeo. I just mentioned him. That Russian ability, we've seen it all over the place. Really, really helpful. Gets us in and out of poison to help stuff like Yveltal Toad matchups and all of that stuff. Also the new Trevenant Shaman deck. I've profiled it, so check it out if you've not seen that yet. It's a real threatening deck, and it focuses around poison as well. So Keldeo, Russian retreating. Hopefully we can get a Floatstone on before we get trainer locked to do it for free. If not, we do have a couple of DCs in here to try and pay that cost if we're really forced into that situation. But yeah, getting us in and out of Pokemon, and more importantly, in and out of poison, very, very helpful. Seeing as though Kyogre does move 2 energy from himself to the bench, sometimes we're going to have to start attacking with bench attackers, so having the Russian retreat is helpful there as well. As an attacker himself, Keldeo is not too shabby. Secret Sword doing 50 plus 20 more for each water. Obviously, I assume we're going to be using Primal Kyogre to set up the Keldeo at some point, only if we really don't have much else going for us on the bench. But Secret Sword, good at killing like non-EXs, stuff like Medicham decks and stuff like that, or Raichu if it's a highly focused Raichu build. Secret Sword can do work here, so fairly decent to bear in mind. Next up we have an Articuno in here. This is a new card from Roaring Skies. I really like it. It serves a multitude of purposes in here, even though I'm only playing one of him. It has a Delta Plus ability, so we get to take an extra prize. This is fantastic. With the Tri-Edge attack, we can set him up with Primal Kyogre as well. Pretty much all of our attackers come via Primal Kyogre. And it does 20, and it's flip 3 coins, 40 more for each heads. Normally, because Primal Kyogre is hitting 150, we're rarely ever killing EXs. But if we charge up Articuno on the bench, we can come in and try and take a third prize now and again with that Delta Plus. So basically use Primal Kyogre to sort of pepper up EXs for these knockouts that we can get with Articuno now and again. Another purpose Articuno serves, just like the Kyogre I was talking about, we can use Articuno defensively against Toad. For just 1 water energy, we can send our opponents active to sleep. So on that coin flip, they're going to stay asleep, and then they have to find some sort of float stone or switch or super scoop up or whatever they play to move their Toad out of the active. And if we keep on going for Chilling Side turn after turn, again, we have Rough Seas to start healing us, so we'll have, 3 or 4 turns of using Articuno. Hopefully one of those times we can try and buy ourselves a turn of trainers to get Kyogre rolling again. The third purpose I really like is for the Donphan matchup. Having that 20 resist to fighting, 120 HP, really, really difficult for Donphan to get over us. Also, of course, we're a water type, so we do have super effective damage on Donphan if we're ever able to Lysander him up. And that's really, really helpful. Thanks to Rough Seas as well. It's very similar to the Manectric Zapdos build that people were playing. People played the Zapdos just to counter the Donphan sort of thing. Combining it with Rough Seas and that resistance, Donphan takes like 3 or 4 turns to knock out an Articuno or a Zapdos back in the day. Unless they used Wreck. And if they used Wreck, of course, the Donphan's then vulnerable to all of our other attackers. So Articuno really is helpful against the Donphan matchup. Quite helpful in some Toad matchups, and more in general if we just need that extra prize to balance out our game, or to finish a game maybe a turn earlier than our opponent expects. Tri-Edge is sometimes a good option for us, so even though it's a single card in here, it really does boost the overall power of Primal Kyogre in terms of matchups here and there, and also just in general, it can be an extra out to winning a game. Finally, rounding out the Pokemon, we've got 2 Shaymin EX in here. Setting up just really helps us literally set up our boards, gets us into more cards, pretty much more consistency overall just by having 2 Shaymins in here. We do play only a couple of DCEs in here, so it's not overly compatible, but every now and again we can use a Sky Return for 30 and put everything back into the hand. Like I say, against Leafeon Raichu decks at the moment, there's loads of them on PTCGO, which is frustrating if you're a Kyogre player. But what I've actually ended up doing is, instead of attaching any energy at all, I basically just keep Sky Returning into a Primal Kyogre, where their Raichu can't one-shot us. Then I'll try and use Rough Seas to heal us and rush in retreat back into a different Shaymin to keep Sky Returning, to try and knock out Leafeons before I start committing energy onto Primal Kyogre. It's a really iffy matchup, and I don't have really any counters to Leafeon in here. I don't feel like the deck's going to be popular enough for me to actually try and tech against Leafeon. But literally that, in my opinion, is our only really awkward matchup. Against Rayquaza, they carry on with speed and sometimes are able to keep up with prize trade. But we have N to try and slow him down, and Mega Turbo means we can set up multiple Kyogres fairly easily as well. So Leafeon matchups are definitely the worst out of all of this. I guess like Shedinja, if anyone plays that, that's also really scary, obviously. But other than that, I feel like Kyogre does have really good matchups across the board. So on to trainers now. We've got a Comp Search, that's pretty mandatory in most decks. We've got 2 Professor's Letter. Obviously it pays the cost for both of the energy for Alpha Growth, so really helpful in here. We've got Skylar as well to search out the letter, so it's searchable energy, which is really nice. We've got a split of 2 Ultra Ball and 3 Dive Ball. Dive Ball searches out anything in the deck other than the Shaman, so of course we've had to balance it out with a couple of Ultra Ball as well. Ultra Ball also serves a nice purpose of being able to discard energy for us, so that we can get Mega Turbo working a bit quicker. So I do like having Ultra Ball in here. Next up, we've got 3 Mega Turbo. Mega Turbo speeds up the Primal Kyogre, helps us recover once our first one gets knocked out as well. Seeing as though we move 2 energy from ourselves, it's not too big of a deal when one goes down, especially because now we can just we've moved 2 energy to a different Kyogre, then we just Mega Evolve, Mega Turbo, single attach, and we've got another one ready to go. We can stream Primal Kyogres fairly consistently in this deck. I'll quickly mention the single escape rope in here. We do run Keldeo Float for the most part in terms of retreating. Escape rope can get us out if Keldeo's been caught in the active position, which sometimes can happen. Also, escape rope really helpful for killing EXs. If we've hit one that's been in the active position for 150 damage, then we escape rope them to the bench, then our next Primal Kyogre's attack can actually get knockouts, which is really, really nice. So, escape rope, a good little combo there, like a mini Lysander, forcing them out of the active rather than forcing something else in that they're not going to enjoy. Simply moving them to the bench is sometimes sufficient in terms of disruption. Finally, rounding out the trainers, other than tools, we have 3 VS Seeker, just re-spamming supporters. It makes complete sense. Pretty much everything plays that. Onto tools, we've got 2 Floatstone for the free retreat of Keldeo, and 3 Spirit Link, again, pretty self-explanatory there. Onto supporters, we've got the 2 Lysander, just like the escape rope, forcing stuff out of the active to the bench so that the snipe can do good damage. And also, thanks to Lysander, we get to choose what we bring up to the active, of course. So again, we can then set up another EX for the following turn, or if the first Tidal Storm did damage to that benched EX, we can actually take a 4 prize turn, killing the one that was active, and then getting the new one out, and then re-sniping that first one to hit the 180 on both. Very, very nice there. So Lysander can create crazy combos with Primal Kyogre. It's a bit more awkward now that quite a few decks are playing Megas, but we can still pick off stuff that are just sat there with Spirit Links and have yet to Mega Evolve. So Lysander still very, very important, and more in general matchups like Domfan. Gets us around Wobbuffet as well, gets us around Trevenant. Very, very important to have Lysander in all your decks pretty much at the moment. Next up, we've got 3 Skylar. Skylar finds combo pieces like Letter for energy, Spirit Link for your Primal. It can grab, everything in the deck, so pretty useful here. I really like having Skylar as well in the deck, because we do play this couple of Shamans. Sometimes we do need more than one card, so Skylar will just grab us that one, and then hope to Shaman into more cards, more outs in the deck. So even though we're not drawing cards, it can be a -1, so then we can find Shaman to get us an extra card. For draw supporters, we're still playing the 4 Juniper 4N. It's just super consistent having these in here. Fairly low supporter count overall. I think that's only, 13? But with the VS Seekers, the Comp, the Shamans, and the Ultra Balls, which are pretty much an out to Shaman most of the time if we need it, it is still relatively consistent in this deck. So, and also, we're fairly happy to be slow with Kyogre sometimes. Just sitting Suicune in the active and waiting for our chance is sometimes a decent strategy anyway, so I feel like it works in here. Final card other than energy is Rough Seas. This really does help our matchup in so many different ways. Against Seismitoad decks, they really just do no damage to us at all for a long time. It really helps us stabilize in that game, even though we're getting hammered away all the time. Just sitting a Suicune active and trying to get every now and again an Aurora Beam off is very helpful. And at some point, if it's not a dedicated Toad deck that has all the hammers in, like if it's a Toady Veltol, we're going to do really well in that matchup, because we're not going to have energy denial, or not much anyway, so we'll be able to get into our Mega and eventually start out-hitting them, whereas Rough Seas will just heal us up the whole time. Cancel out laser damage as well, very, very nice. Against Manectric, even Mega Manectric can't two-shot us with... Mega Manectric couldn't anyway, but the normal Manectric, if we've got a tool on us, which for the most part we will, either a Headringer from them or our own Spirit Link, they would be two-shotting us, but now we stay out of range with a Rough Seas, Stuff like Latios, if people want to play that, we stay out of range from a 2-shot. For the most part, anything that can't hit 240, so pretty much everything but Rayquaza, we can just Rough Seas heal to make that 2-shot into sometimes a 3-shot, which is really, really helpful for us. In terms of against Colourless Rayquaza, it's just a stadium to bounce their Skyfield, so that's pretty useful as well. So I like having a 3 count in here, just to force a Stadium War out of the opponent. Onto energy now. We're playing 11, which is relatively high. We have Mega Turbo to respam the energy as well, so normally we're going to have enough throughout the whole game. It's important to note we don't play Trump card in here. It's something I have considered, but I've not actually thrown in, because I can't really see space for it right now. I'm quite happy with the list as it is, but Trump card could be something to consider if you're really, really worried about these decks that are just going to deny energy the whole time. But for now, we're just sat on 11 energy. You've got 2 DCE. It's compatible with Suicune. It can pay retreat for Keldeo if we're under Trainer Lock. It works with Sky Return. Sky Return's really a nice attack, actually. I've ended up using it a lot more than I would have expected. Using it after you've been end, just to bring a Shaman back into the hand to force your opponent to either end you again, or that you can refresh your hand. It's really, really nice. So having a couple of DCs in here is cool. Bear in mind, Tidal Storm can have a single colourless, so it doesn't hurt to put one onto a Kyogre, especially because we can move it anyway with the attack. Also, it's nice for Giant Whirlpool as well, having that double colourless cost in there as well. So it really doesn't hurt to put 2 in here. And then we have the 9 water energy. I originally did have just 11 water. It does mean Mega Turbo is more live more quickly for the most part. But I feel like against stuff like Toad decks, it's so nice having Suicune attacking like as quickly as turn 2 and stuff. With a combination of Rough Seas, it's just so disruptive. So although we've sort of lowered down our water count to make the Primal Kyogre slightly slower, I guess. Normally it makes no difference, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with the energy count, to be honest. So that is the deck. Let's crack into a few games here. And hopefully we can do well and avoid the old Leafeon, because that is always the problem for this deck. So let's see who we come up against. We have Tiny13. It looks like he's playing a fighting deck. Could be a Landorus build, it could be a Groudon build, could even be Donphan. We'll just have to wait and see here. I really do like our matchup against Donphan. Like I said, with that Articuno, we can do so much work. If it's Groudon, Suicune can offer a threat as well. So I think we should have a pretty good game here. And of course against Landorus, we've got weakness. So we'll see what we've got. And it looks like it is a Donphan build with a Lucario as well. Fairly interesting. So first thing I'm going to do is see if Articuno is in here. If he's prized, that would be a shame, because this would be his time to shine. We do have the Articuno. I'm not going to search him immediately, because it's still worth finding Kyogre first, because Kyogre's like a quicker way of finding Articuno, because we get to move energy onto Articuno nice and quick. So what we're going to do here, we're going to attach a water and be content with finding Spirit Link, so that we can attach an N next turn, or even use our Skylar here, and see what our opponent can do this turn, really. We've got Suicune in the active, nice and safe. Looks like a pretty good start from us here, and we'll see what our opponent can do. We see a Muscle Band onto the Phanpy, and an Energy as well. Robosub comes down, and then there is an N. I'm not too concerned about that. We see a Fighting Stadium and a Silver Bangle come onto the Hawlucha, a Muscle Band as well onto the Lucario, and just a pass over to us. So we don't have any water in the discard pile yet, so that Mega Turbo is not very helpful. We do have Dive Ball. I'm going to go for that Primal Kyogre straight away. And Evolve. And I might be just content going for the DCE here. I don't really want to end him into new cards, because he didn't really do too much. So I think I'm just going to attach past this turn. We have Escape Rope if we really need to attack next turn, but I feel fairly content for now. We see our opponent evolves into a Donphan. and a strong energy comes onto the Lucario. You see a Karina as well to find a Machop, so it's some sort of Machamp build. It looks like quite a clunky Donphan build here, just fighting dot deck, I guess. So we see Machop and an Escape Rope as well. The Escape Rope's, he's probably going to attack with Donphan, so I'm happy to go into the Keldeo here. Anything he brings up will survive a hit from, so not too worried about that. Donphan does indeed come out, and we get hit for 80 with the Muscle Band and the Fighting Stadium combined, doing some good damage there. So we do top deck a Water, not too helpful. We have the issue of Escape Rope doesn't really help us too much because he'll just come into Robo Sub. Most likely anyway. N, not too nice, but he didn't Karina for like a VS Seek or anything, so we might have something there. I'm just going to go for the Juniper, so we can hopefully find an energy, or either 2 energy or an energy and a Mega Turbo, and then a Float Stone. That's probably the ideal here. Worst case scenario, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see here. I don't feel like using the Escape Rope was too helpful there. We find a couple of energy. No way of moving this Keldeo though. We could Ultra Ball for a Shaman to try and get some more outs. That might be something I go for here. We're going to go for that double attach. We're going to Ultra Ball away a Juniper and a VS Seeker. Find ourselves a Shaman. We're just digging now for the Float Stone, really. We're going to put a Spirit Link onto the Suicune just to get it out of the hand and go for that Shaman for 5 here. We do end up finding Float Stone. We find another Keldeo as well. So I'm actually going to opt to put it onto this Keldeo because it's more safe. This is just catcher bait at this point. So here we can rush in and freely retreat into our Primal. And we have a decision where we want to put the energy. I think it's probably best on this Keldeo. Seeing as though he has Donphan and Machamp, the Suicune's not going to be overly useful. Nothing's like perfect at this point, but we may as well. I'm going to move the DCE as well, just because it's kind of irritating having it on there. So we set up that Lucario for a knockout and take the first prize of the game here. We'll see if our opponent actually has anything. We see a Robo come down and just a spinning turn for 80. Probably into a Robo Sub. Yes, indeed, that's what he does go for here. And we top deck into a Ultra Ball. We can definitely get an attack off this turn. It's just whether we... I might just Skylar for a Dive Ball into Articuno and start threatening that. I think that's a pretty fine play here. We can go for the letter. We could also go for the Rough Seas. We're sat on 160, so I think we're pretty safe in terms of hit points here. I don't see much coming out to knock us out here. We could just Ultra Ball for nothing and go for a Shaman to try and find a Lysander. And if we don't, we've always got the Mega Turbo. I think that's not a bad play either. We have VS Seeker if we get nothing else. So we're gonna Ultra Ball Fail Search and set up for 5 again. And we do indeed find Lysander. You can see the power of Shaman, how useful it can be. Definitely in this deck where you're always searching for odd things here and there. And we can actually take the knockout and carry on attaching to this Keldeo. And again, more damage onto the Lucario here. I'm putting a lot of... Okay, so we see a scoop from our opponent. It looks like he didn't have too much going on there. And we had a pretty good setup. So that was a good game 1. Let's see what we can do against someone else on the ladder. And here we have Quilava 313. We're going to flip some coins And it is indeed a heads here, so we'll go first. And it looks like it's... Wow, okay. This is one of the most disgusting matchups for us. It's the Helpless Scream Shedinja combined with Floette. So this is absolutely horrible for us. We'll see what we can do, though. This is a really tricky matchup. We have Grass Weakness, of course, for most of our guys. We see a Mew straight away. And I'm really just in two minds about what I want to start attaching to. If we find... Oh man, this is just a difficult game to approach, really. Basically, I want something that can hit 40 damage next turn. I might Skylift a Dive Ball for Suicune. So that next turn, he's obviously going to try and find some Ninkadas. And we've got Lysander. So I think I want to go about... That's probably how I want to approach this. We're going to grab a Dive Ball. And we're going to find ourselves a Suicune here. Suicune covers us against Mew. And hopefully next turn, if we can find like DCE... Actually, we need to find a few things to get Lysander next turn. But Suicune's still a decent play in my opinion, because it's safe from the Mew at least. So we'll see what our opponent can come up with here. We do indeed see a Ninkada. 2 Ninkadas hit the bench actually. And then we see a Trainer's Mail. It'll be interesting to see if it's a Frozen City build or a Team Magma's Secret Base. Both of those two decks have sort of been discussed as the way of playing it. Seeing as though she started benching Ninkada straight away, I imagine it's the Frozen City build. We see an Ultra Ball into a Flabebe. The Floette has the ability increasing the HP of grass types by 20. So you can actually stack more than one energy onto a Shedinja, which is pretty scary as well. We see a Sycamore here. And a Rainbow comes straight onto the Mew. Ninkada does actually have an attack 20 and doing 10 to yourself. It's actually quite a useful attack in the early turns for these Shedinja decks. You could also go for Razor Leaf for 10. You could even steal Chilling Sigh. It looks like that's what he's gone for. We unfortunately do wake up. Or unfortunate for him. So here we're in an awkward spot again. I think Juniper's fine here. Juniper means we have Lysander in the discard pile for VS Seekers. And none of that looks too helpful. If we can find Floatstone DCE, we might be okay. But like I say, this is a really, really iffy matchup for us. We find Escape Rope. Oh, but man, no double colourless. I'm actually going to go for the Rough Seas. We're going to Ultra Ball away Letter and Mega Turbo. And try and find Shaman to get us again into a better position here. We have Escape Rope to try and kill one of these guys. And then if we find DCE, we can actually get a knockout. So we'll try from these 3 cards to get it. We do miss, it looks like. We can find a few things with the Dive Balls here. I'm tempted just not to bench Kyogre at all this game, because he's just such a liability in this matchup. At least it forces Shedinjas out, so potentially I will. We can Dive Ball as well to find ourselves the other Suicune, I guess. Keldeo, not too helpful really. Again, he's just going to have a target on his head the whole game. I guess rushing and retreating is still really helpful for us for now. So we will attach again to the Suicune, and just hand it over to our opponent. We see a Rainbow come onto the Nincada early on, and then a Frozen City comes into play. Interesting to see that he played the Frozen City afterwards. It means that he can still Shedinja without dying. But of course, with Flabebe and Floette, you can actually sometimes survive anyway. We see another Mew hit the bench. This Mew's only going to be hitting us for 50 so far, so we're in still in decent shape in this game. We see an Comp Search getting rid of a Nincada and an N. Our opponent first needs to find a helpless Cream Shedinja. And it looks like they have. Evolving over here. Such an interesting card, such an interesting attack from Roaring Skies. Making decks like this actually usable. Quite interesting. We see a Muscle Man come down. So we're going to get hit for 70, it looks like this turn. If our opponent does opt to go for that attack. Again, he could try and send us asleep. Oh, so he actually opts to use the Cursed Rain attack from Shedinja, putting 10 onto everything. Interesting there. Oh, what? Oh, it switches itself to the bench as well. Yeah, I forgot about that. We can go for the Rough Seas here. And go for the Escape Rope as well. Forcing our opponent into a slightly more awkward situation. He might feed us into the Flabebe here. Potentially even the Nincada. He actually goes for the Mew. Fairly interesting. It will survive an attack from Suicune, but still. Then we can end here. Trying to find an energy. We do find one. We also find Spirit Link and our Mega Evolution, making us slightly less weak to catchers here. We can Rough Seas off all of that damage and just go for the... what else do we need this turn? I think we're happy to hold Shaman in hand for now. So we can just Aurora Beam for 70. We see Silver Bangle coming onto the Nincada that has damage on it. Grass Energy comes onto the Mew, and then we see an N as well. I'm surprised. I'm trying to think why he would put that Grass Energy on. Trying to think what attack he's going to go for. Potentially a Sky Return even. I'm not too sure here. Seeing as though there wasn't any Frozen City or anything, doesn't really benefit him too much. Unless that is the play he's going for. We see a Virizion hit the bench. Oh, okay, so it could be even an Emerald Slash now. Trying to set up more Pokemon here. Obviously, we're not going to get hit for any damage, but... we'll see what he wants to do here. We see, yeah, it looks like that is the move he's gone for. He's gone for the Sky Return, healing that Mew, making it very annoying for us here. But now we can go for the VS Seeker and use that Lysander that we put in there earlier with the Juniper. And kill a Shedinja, I think, is the best route to go for here. We've got to somehow get through the army of Shedinja at some point. I'm also going to start attaching to Articuno. Going to be a useful attacker in this game for sure at some point. We can Mega Turbo. And we're going to Ultra Ball away some useless stuff and then just go for a Shaman here. So we'll fail the search and Shaman for a fresh 6. We get a Float Stone that we can slap onto the Keldeo here and then just go for Aurora Beam. We have VS Seeker for next turn to Lysander again, so it looks pretty good for now. The short-term goal is working, I guess. We see the Nincada come into the active. It, of course, will be able to knock us out if he finds Shedinja. We do see an Ultra Ball here. And thanks to that Floette, I can't kill him with a Shaman next turn, which is a bit awkward. That 10 damage with the weakness that Suicune has is enough to get a knockout here. So we do see that helpless scream for 100 damage, knocking out our Suicune. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to take out this Shedinja. It might be a turn where I just Sky Return here. Trying to think what's best to hide into. Yeah, it's going to be a Sky Return. It's just, again, what can I really go into that doesn't really hurt us too much? Potentially into the other Shaman. The Articuno is way too valuable to give up here. If we go into the Primal, it's just dead for sure. I think going into the other Shaman's the best move here. Hopefully, if we can eat our way through this Shedinja, we should be safe. We actually see an escape rope, so we're in a slightly more awkward position. I might just feed him the Primal here. They're going to need to find a way to retreat again into the Shedinja, or get more damage on to the Mew this turn. We see Grass Energy onto the Mew. It could just be to pay retreat. But if we're able to kill this Shedinja, we should be in good shape. Because we've seen quite a few Nincada hit the bench. So we do see that retreat. And a knockout for only 460 damage. Pretty weak attacker, I'd say. And our opponent is up in prizes, but we're going to be able to kill the Shedinja this turn and have good outs for the future. So it's going to be a pretty simple turn, I think. Just attach DCE. We could go for the N here to be a bit more disruptive. I think that's a good idea. Especially because we're going to go up another prize. Try and force our opponent into a more awkward spot. Seeing as though we can Sky Return as well, we know that even if we have a bad N, we can get some good stuff from the Shaman. So we're able to take a prize. Our opponent has to choose what to go into now. Chooses the Mew, and we're going to go into Keldeo. We see another Muscle Band come onto the Mew, and a Sycamore, so not the worst N in the world there. We see a Rainbow come onto the Mew. Our opponents really struggled to find Frozen City this game. With that Rainbow, though, they are going to be able to copy the Articuno's attack, potentially. We do have that other Keldeo in hand, if that's the worry. We see a Nincada. So we could even go for the Slight Intrusion attack. That is, I think, what we're seeing here. What was that? Yeah, it was, because of the Muscle Band. We can bench Keldeo. Rough Seas off some of that damage. And I'm going to Skylar, I think, for a VS Seeker. So that we can potentially Lysander next turn. Because we need to kill this guy again. And I think I'm just going to rush in and hide with this Keldeo. Not much else I'd like to do this turn. So pretty much a game of cat and mouse at this point. That Mew now with 100. It's doing 170 with that Muscle Band right now. If he's able to find another Shedinja, that is. We do see a VS Seeker. And our opponent finds a Skylar. Could just be going for a ball card to search out the Shedinja now. It does look like that's the case. We see an Ultra Ball. For Shedinja. So we are going to go down to 1 prize, but basically next turn I'm just going for the Lysander play on that Shedinja. We need to get 1 heads off of this Articuno. And if we do that, I think we'll win eventually. So, going full YOLO with Articuno. We'll VS Seeker for that Lysander. Lysander him up, and we just need 1 heads. That's all we need. We'll quickly get a Rough Seas in there as well. And go for that big Tri-Edge, the moment of truth. We do end up getting 2 heads, and it looks like we're in pretty good shape now. And thanks to that Delta Plus, we only need to kill 1 more Pokemon for game. If we can capture up this Floette next turn, maybe, we should be in good shape here. The Mew comes active. We see a Trainer's Mail. Our opponent only with 9 cards left in deck. I think all of their Ninkadas are dead as well, so we find an N, or opponent finds an N anyway. Another Rainbow comes onto the Mew. So it could be that they go for Emerald Slash this turn. We do get End. We find our own N and a Suicune. And we just get hit for 70 with that Emerald Slash. And a Grass Energy comes onto the other Mew here. We find, what's that? It's a Professor's Letter. We can drop the Suicune down, go for the Letter here. Finding 2 energy, we can get a Rough Seas off. And I don't feel like it's worth risking here. So we're just going to attach to the Suicune and rush in and retreat here. Now we force a Lysander out of our opponent and some other attack. And it looks like our opponent scoops again to us. So yeah, we somehow were able to overcome that Shedinja deck. I was saying earlier how I think it's one of our worst matchups, but somehow we wrangled our way around that. Simply by ignoring the Mew for the most part and trying to kill the Shedinjas. But there we go, guys. 2 games with Primal Kyogre, 2 wins as well, even though one of them was a pretty dodgy matchup for us. This deck is pretty funky. It's able to stall for long periods with a combination of Suicune and Rough Seas, and essentially try and help you build up your board, like you've just seen in the last 2 games there. So, I hope you enjoyed, guys, and tell me what you thought about this deck, if you think it is going to be top tier for Roaring Skies. I think it does have fairly good matchups across the board, like I was saying earlier, so it definitely could be a contender. So, I've been Joe from Omnipoke, and I will see you guys next time.